"Go to us." The command didn't come from a drill instructor's voice. It came from something colder, a little too personal, like a man testing how far he could push a line before anyone stopped him. The pre-dawn air at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado was thick with ocean mist, and the concrete training courtyard looked like a blank gray stage where reputations got built or broken in front of witnesses who never forgot. A woman in plain Navy PT gear was on one knee, not because she was weak, but because a hand like a vice was forcing her down. The man doing it was a senior instructor with a chest full of ribbons and a face that had forgotten how to doubt itself. Around them, hundreds of men stood in formation or clustered in loose ranks. But our candidates fresh from a brutal run, instructors along the edges, a few operators passing through the complex who slowed down because something about the scene didn't feel normal. The woman's name was Lieutenant Commander June Hartwell. No visible rank on her shirt, no insignia on her waistband. Just a gray top, black shorts, worn running shoes, hair locked into a regulation bun, and a calm expression that didn't match the pressure being applied to her shoulder. Most of the candidates assumed she was a visitor, maybe an evaluator, maybe some admin officer sent to observe. That's what they'd been told. What they weren't told was that certain files don't open without multiple signatures, and certain names don't show up on normal rosters, not because they are unimportant, but because the people who carry them are used when the Navy doesn't want attention, only results. And what happened next wouldn't be remembered as a fight. It would be remembered as a lesson delivered in under a minute, in front of an audience trained to spot weakness, who suddenly realized they'd been watching the wrong person. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, take a second to lock in with this community. Subscribe, because these stories aren't just entertainment. They are reminders that respect matters, and assumptions can wreck careers faster than any enemy ever could. June had arrived at Coronado 2 days earlier with a simple cover story, Training Integrity Advisor, assigned to observe how leadership handled pressure, how instructors corrected failure, how standards were enforced without turning into cruelty. She didn't talk much. She didn't introduce herself with speeches. She watched with a stillness that made some men uncomfortable because it felt like being measured. She moved like someone who counted energy the way other people counted money, spending only what was needed, never more. In the fog, she looked smaller than most of the men around her, but something about her posture didn't shrink. She stood square, balanced, as if gravity had made an agreement with her years ago and never revised it. The candidates noticed little things, how she never fidgeted while the wind cut through wet fabric, how her eyes tracked hands and hips instead of faces, how she positioned herself near exits without acting like she was doing it. The instructors noticed too, and one of them took it personally. Chief Instructor Mason Grady had been a fixture here for over a decade. He was the kind of man candidates feared because fear made them fast, and fast made them survive. He believed in standards the way some people believe in religion. Pure, unquestionable, and guarded by punishment. To him, any outside observer was a threat, but a female observer in his space. That felt like an insult. Not because he thought women were useless in the Navy. He'd say he respected women in the right roles, but because he believed this pipeline belonged to a specific kind of person, and anyone who challenged that belief was messing with something he'd built his identity on. June didn't argue with him when he cornered her after the morning evolution. She didn't debate policy. She didn't give him the satisfaction of defensiveness. She simply listened, nodded once, and said she was there to evaluate process, not interfere with training. That calm answer didn't soothe him. It sharpened him. Grady started doing what men like him do when they can't control a narrative. He tried to control the frame. He suggested, loudly, in front of candidates, that an advisor should experience what candidates experience. He added a smile that wasn't friendly. A few candidates traded glances because they recognized the tone, not mentorship, targeting. June agreed without hesitation. That annoyed him even more, because he wanted her to refuse. He wanted the story to be, she couldn't handle it. He didn't get that story. He ran her through a punishing series of calisthenics and holds meant to humiliate, not train. June didn't make speeches. She didn't show off. She just did it. Controlled breathing. Clean form. No dramatic struggle. No collapse. Not even anger. And when he realized she wasn't going to break in the ways he expected, he reached for the next lever, one that usually works on everybody: public dominance. The summons came before sunrise on the third day. Candidates were yanked from racks and marched out half awake, boots thudding, teeth chattering in the cold, wet air. Floodlights turned the courtyard into a washed-out arena. Too many instructors were present for a standard evolution, like people had shown up because they'd heard there might be a show. June arrived on time, dressed like the candidates again. No rank, no title, no shield. She stood where told. Grady stepped forward and announced, for everyone to hear, that there would be a capability demonstration to confirm whether the visiting advisor was qualified to speak on training. The candidates didn't cheer. They didn't laugh. They just watched, because even at this stage they already knew the truth about the grinder. It wasn't concrete that broke people. It was the crowd. It was shame. It was being singled out and realizing no one was coming to help you. Phase 1 was physical: cold water, sand, fatigue, just enough to make a point. June passed it cleanly, not with swagger, with discipline. Phase 2 was heavier: weight on the back, soft sand underfoot, designed to make the body feel stupid and slow. June finished it too, and the mood shifted in small ways you could feel more than see. A few candidates stopped looking at her like an outsider. A couple instructors stopped smiling. Grady's face tightened like he was holding something in. Then he called Phase 3, and you could hear the change in the air, like someone had unplugged the normal rules. Combatives. Full contact. Not the kind of controlled sparring meant to teach technique. This was designed to put her in her place. 2 instructors stepped forward, both bigger, both confident, both wearing that look men wear when they believe the ending is guaranteed. The first one came in hard, trying to overwhelm her with strength and intimidation. June didn't backpedal. She didn't flinch. She shifted just enough to make his power miss, and in the same motion she captured his wrist and elbow like she'd done it 1,000 times. It didn't look flashy. It looked efficient. A small turn of the hips, a lever applied at the exact angle the joint hates. The instructor's confidence evaporated into a sharp sound and a sudden drop to his knees. He tapped fast, face tightened in pain and shock, as if he couldn't believe a smaller body had turned him into a problem he couldn't solve. June released immediately and stepped back, hands open, breathing steady. The second instructor didn't rush. He circled, trying to be smart. He wanted to prove he was the professional. He shot in for a takedown with clean timing. June sprawled, heavy and flat, then shifted her weight and threaded an arm through like a key finding a lock. She used his momentum against him, rolled to his back, and locked a choke in a way that didn't crush the throat. It simply turned off the lights. The instructor fought for a few seconds, then stopped, body going slack, and June released instantly, rolling away and standing up without celebration. The pit went silent. Not wow silent. Not cool silent. The kind of silence you get when a room realizes it misjudged reality. Grady stepped forward, and you could tell he decided he couldn't accept what he'd just seen. He couldn't let the story end with her standing. His voice dropped low so it sounded like a private correction, but it was loud enough for everyone. "On your knees," he said. "Right now, show them you know your place." June didn't respond. She didn't argue. That made him angrier. He reached down, grabbed her shoulder, and drove his weight forward like he was moving furniture. Candidates tensed. A couple instructors leaned in, expecting her to fold. Because in their heads, the script was already written. Big man forces compliance. Small woman submits. Crowd learns the lesson. June let him push her, just enough. Just long enough for him to commit his balance and lock himself into the mistake. Then she moved. It didn't look like rage. It looked like math. Her hand rotated his wrist outward. Her other forearm struck into the center of his body with a compact force that emptied his lungs. Grady's posture broke for half a second, and in that half second June stepped to the outside, hooked his leg, and guided him down in a controlled drop that turned his aggression into gravity. He hit the sand hard, face twisted, breath gone, and before he could scramble, June pinned his arm and shoulder in a position that made every experienced fighter in that courtyard wince. Not because it was flashy, but because it was final. Grady tried to muscle out. He couldn't. He tried to twist. That made it worse. June applied pressure in small increments, giving him time to understand the choice in front of him. Keep fighting and break something important, or tap and keep what dignity he had left. He didn't want to tap. Pride kept him stupid. So June did what professionals do when someone refuses to stop being dangerous. She ended it. A sharp shift. A controlled crank. A loud, unmistakable yelp. Grady's arm went limp, and the fight drained out of him like someone pulled a plug. June released and stood up immediately, stepping back with her hands down, calm as she'd been at the start. Two instructors rushed in, one to check Grady, one to look at June like he wasn't sure whether to be furious or afraid. And that's when a new presence stepped into the light. Commander Adrian Keene, executive staff from the training command, walked out from the shadow line near the building, posture rigid, face blank in the way only senior leadership can be when they are about to ruin someone's life without raising their voice. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need a summary. His eyes swept the pit, the downed instructor, the two opponents who had already been handled, the candidates frozen in formation, and June standing like she was waiting for paperwork. Keene's voice carried without effort. "Everyone stays right where they are," he said. Then he looked at Grady with a calm that felt heavier than shouting. "Chief Instructor Mason Grady," he said, "you just laid hands on a classified program operator in front of witnesses." Heads turned. A few candidates blinked like they didn't understand the words. Keene's gaze moved to June, and the respect in his posture wasn't performative. It was precise. "Lieutenant Commander June Hartwell," he said, using her rank out loud for the first time, reporting as assigned. Then he faced the courtyard again. "For the candidates," he said, "listen carefully. The officer you just watched is not here for your entertainment. She is not here to be tested by anyone outside my authority. She is here because this command received credible reports that certain staff were abusing position, sabotaging evaluations, and using intimidation to hide misconduct behind the word standards." Grady tried to speak through clenched teeth, but pain and panic made it sound like noise. Keene didn't let him. "Hartwell's record is restricted," he continued, "because she served in roles we don't brief in open spaces. Her qualifications were never in question. The only thing in question was whether this training environment could police itself, or whether we needed an outside mirror held up to it." He paused, and that pause felt like a sentence. "Today, you got your answer." The candidates stood absolutely still, but their faces changed in small ways, some with shock, some with relief, some with something like admiration they didn't want to show. Because this wasn't about a woman beating men. It was about someone refusing to be bullied in a place where bullying often gets disguised as tradition. It was about watching authority, real authority, draw a hard line between discipline and abuse. Medical personnel moved in. Grady was carried out. The two instructors who'd volunteered to teach her a lesson were pulled aside and separated from the group, their confidence replaced by a quiet dread. Keene turned to June and lowered his voice just slightly. "You did what you were sent to do," he said. June's expression didn't change, but for a brief second her eyes looked past the courtyard, past the lights, past the ocean fog, like memory was calling her name. Because June didn't learn patience here. She learned it long before Coronado. She grew up in a small place where silence was survival, raised by a father who didn't teach speeches. He taught stillness. He taught her that loud people rely on noise to feel powerful, and that real danger usually arrives quietly. June joined the Navy young, not chasing glory, chasing purpose. She spent years in the kind of work no one claps for: signals, patterns, waiting. Then one day on a mission that went wrong, she made a choice that broke protocol because protocol couldn't carry a wounded teammate. She didn't win medals in a ceremony with cameras. She earned trust in moments where the only applause is breathing again. And that trust put her in a program that doesn't exist on paper, where capability isn't about ego, it's about outcome. That's why she was here now. Not to embarrass the pipeline, not to prove a point, but to protect the integrity of training from people who weaponize tradition to cover up personal cruelty. 8 weeks later, the grinder looked the same, but the air around it didn't. Grady was gone. removed after an investigation that included witness statements, training logs, and a set of floodlight camera angles nobody knew were running. 2 other instructors were reassigned pending review. New oversight protocols were introduced with language that made the message clear without drama. Standards stay high. Abuse ends now. June stayed on as a senior evaluator for integrity and candidate safety, not softening anything, but making sure the right kind of hard remained. Hard that builds warriors, not hard that feeds someone's insecurity. One morning, during a recovery run along the beach, a candidate fell into step beside her. Careful, respectful, not trying to be her friend. He didn't ask about classified missions. He didn't ask for secrets. He said, simply, I didn't know how easy it was to confuse confidence with competence. June looked at the surf for a moment, then back at him. That confusion gets people hurt, she said. Out there, the enemy doesn't care what you believe about yourself, only what you can do, and what you choose to do when power tempts you. The candidate nodded like he'd just been handed something heavier than advice. June kept running, pace steady, eyes forward, the fog thinning as sunlight started to burn through. Back at the courtyard, she stood for a moment alone where it had happened, the place where a crowd watched a bully try to write an ending and watched a professional erase it without hatred, without ego, just consequence. Then she turned and walked toward the day, toward the work, toward a future that doesn't ask who belongs, only who is capable and who is disciplined enough to use that capability with control.